We love to think that the future of humanity is in the West, with Western values projected across the world. But if I read you right, you think the future of humanity lies in Asia. How come?
Well, I mean, there's again a literal answer and maybe an intellectual answer. The literal answer to what or who is the future of humanity is Asians, because the majority of the human population is Asians who live in Asia, about 5 billion of them. And the further you look in the future, Steve, as you know, the world population is peaking and actually going to decline relatively soon. So the share of the human population that is Asians in Asia grows, does not recede. So we can be philosophical, and I enjoy that very much. However, the literal answer to the question, who is the future of humanity, is Asians and Asian youth in particular, because there are more young people in Asia also than in the entire rest of the world combined. Now you're at, if we can get into the intellectual part, and you could almost say ideological or ideational sort of question about where the future lies in terms of the vision for the future, or the self, the world view of different regions. Asians do not wake up in the morning, and allow me please to speak on behalf of my 5 billion neighbors here in Asia. I actually dedicated my book on Asia to my 5 billion neighbors, and now that I live here in the region and get to feel that energy of being surrounded by 5 billion people, it's quite awakening and enlightening experience. And I will say, again, on behalf of those neighbors, I don't know a single human being in the entire radius, again, in this vast landmass that you see behind me on this map, these 5 billion people, not one of them, and I think it's just so important, Steve, for me to say it really bluntly, in that American-ish way that I can. Not a single one of the 5 billion people that lives on this map behind me wakes up in the morning saying, I wish my country were more like, Britain or America or something like that, right? Not a single one. So let's just disabuse ourselves of this notion of an intellectual teleology or even a political teleology that leads people in Asia to want to be like us, like Western countries. They want no such thing. Every society that I've traveled in, all 160 of them, really just want to be better versions of themselves. And they're shopping in a marketplace of ideas and policies and history and administrative regimes, and picking and choosing what role models they want to have based on what problem they're trying to solve. They're going to learn about public housing from Singapore. They're going to learn about national service from Finland. They're going to look at environmental conservation policies, maybe from a European country. They're going to get their solar panels and electric cars from China, and so on and so forth. There is no single Western country that serves as an off-the-shelf model for any country in Asia. And again, by literal definition, most people in the world live in Asian countries, democracies and non-democracies. They all just want to be their best selves. They want to achieve the next best thing that they can achieve the next day and the next day and the next day. And I think that's a very good thing, quite frankly. And it forces us to have to compete in that marketplace of ideas and say, if my ideas are better, will they work for you? And how can I help you become a better, what you want to be through my ideas? And if you can't demonstrate that, you're not in the game here in Asia.
Well, okay, I hear what you're saying. Maybe a bit of a strange follow-up here, but I think you're probably the ideal person to ask this question to, given that you were born in India, but educated in, I guess, Britain and the United States. So you're at kind of the crossroads of these two massive cultural institutions, value propositions, and so on. Would you prefer a world that projected more Western values or more Asian values?
Well, I'm for syncretism, and I've written several books about this, as you know, where I kind of look at not an either or dynamic, but a both and, right? What can we learn from each other? What is it about Western conceptions of universal human rights in the sense of individual freedom, and Eastern values, if you want to call them that, that you could describe as a communitarian or collectivist, or whatever the case may be. And I think there's virtues in both sides. And I think, again, the winning societies of the future are ones that balance those virtues and don't label them Eastern or Western, but rather think about how do you achieve certain utilitarian outcomes in a society, irrespective of what its cultural background is. Again, to remind everyone, more people live in democracies in Asia than live in democracies in the entire rest of the world. And that's even with a giant non-democratic country called China, occupying a big chunk of Asia. That's how many people there are in Asia. That's how many democracies there are in Asia. One can't look at Asia and hold it synonymous with the East, and look at the East and hold it synonymous with China. That's not the way it works. You're talking about 5 billion people who mostly live in some type of a democratic and aspirationally liberal, quite frankly, set of countries. But how that's going to look in the end state is not going to look like Britain or America. Perhaps it could look like a mishmash of models. But then those outcomes, those regime types that we'll see evolve here in Asia, are not going to necessarily adopt Western values or strategies because they're Western. It's going to be things that are universal first and happen to work for them in that context.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.